Hello everyone, welcome to this online event of the Materials and Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance, MECLA. Today's spotlight will tackle some of the barriers to the take-up of low-emission materials head-on, busting myths as we go. My name is Hudson Worsley from Precinct, and I have great pleasure in being the chair of MECLA and hosting today's event. I'm joining you today from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I would like to acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land. I pay my respect to elders past and present and welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Today we'll be hearing from a terrific panel of speakers with practical experience of some of the myths and the barriers that are in our way and how to bust them. We'll conclude with a panel discussion to respond to comments from the audience, that's you, and to delve even further into the expertise of our speakers. We are recording this event and we're being viewed by over 450 registered attendees, so that's terrific. Such interest in the topics we're covering. So yes, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. And I'll field those when we go through the panel discussion at the end. And note that this event qualifies for 1 CPD point for Green Building Council of Australia members and 1.5 for Engineers Australia members for live attendance. So please let the MECLA Secretariat know if you haven't already done so at registration. Now, importantly, as always, I'd like to remind all of our attendees that MECLA operates under a sound governance framework. The governance requirements are really important to make sure that we operate in a pre-competition environment. We don't tolerate any anti-competitive behaviours, and if there are conflicts of interest, please speak up and we'll deal with them accordingly. Really important that we act in the common good, in the greater interest to progress our mission of getting onto a trajectory, an emissions trajectory consistent with the Paris Agreement. And to do that, we have to stay pre-competition. Now to business. Our speakers today will be Dylan Viviers, Specifications Manager at Holcim. Dylan will talk to us about some of the roadblocks faced by Holcim in the residential sector and his experience in dealing with perceived barriers. He'll be followed by Gary Hume, Business Development Manager of Sustainable Products at Hymix. And he'll be, again, busting some myths that you can't achieve early age strength with low carbon concrete. And Gary's focus will be the industrial sector. Thomas Ranger is a sustainability advisor at Laing O'Rourke. He's our next speaker, and he'll talk us through a case study where the company used 70% SCM concrete mix in piles. He'll be followed by Melissa Herman, National Manager of Commercial Systems and Specifications at Capral, the Capral low-cal aluminium, and two forms of that product. So welcome, Melissa. We look forward to hearing from you. Matt DeMarco is next at Inti APAC, and he'll talk to us about deviation from material specifications and pathways to deviation. He's on site today in high-vis, so looking forward to hearing his perspectives and practical experience. And then joining us for the panel discussion, rather than one of our speakers, Nicole Sullivan from ThinkStep ANZ is going to help us in the panel discussion. She's a constant contributor to MECLA and adding a life cycle assessment specialist perspective to our myth busting today. Quite an exceptional lineup. So let's get going. Dylan, can I ask you to start us off, please?
Thanks, Hudson. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And now I forgot to mention, we've got the Mentimeter going. Dylan, sorry, can I pop back to the...
You may?
Yep, I've mucked that up. Apologies.
All good.
Alexi, can you help us there, mate? While I was rambling on, we had the Mentimeter running. What myths and perceptions need busting? All right. Cost, expensive, costly. I think that's right in the middle there. Plenty of others, but I think cost is the one that's standing out to be most. Greenwashing, strength, low strength, quality, reliability. All right, probably no surprises there for the practitioners in our panel. Thanks everybody for having a go at the Mentimeter. Appreciate that. Dylan, I'll hand back to you this time. Thank you, mate.
All good. Thanks again, Hudson. And look, hi everyone. Thanks very much for having me, and it's great to be a part of this. I think before I go into it, I mean, I wasn't going to show this slide, but it's important to reinforce, building materials account for 10 to 20% of all carbon emissions globally. It's significant, and concrete plays a massive part of that. We all need to start thinking, really start focusing on, in a world where sustainable construction is expected, the role of building materials has never been more important. And it's all of us that have a role to play in that, right the way through the supply chain, from supplier to specifier to government, to the developer, the builder, the concrete placer. It's about having those conversations early in the piece, really starting to talk through the whole process and working with each part of the supply chain to ensure that everyone's comfortable, everyone's aware of it, they know what to expect. It's about us all coming together and having those early conversations. From Wholesome's perspective, we launched EcoPact back in April 2021, a low carbon concrete, achieving 30 to 60% reduction of based on the reference case and verified by an EPD. It's been 2 years now since we launched EcoPact, and there's been a lot of work to work through and help with that education process. I think last year alone, I did 140, 150 odd presentations to all different stakeholders from architects, engineers, sustainability consultants, developers, to actually being on site with the concreter while he's actually placing it. And that's a key part of that whole journey, is making sure we as suppliers are standing up and actually helping everyone through the supply chain to understand that there are low carbon solutions out there. You can start using them. And it doesn't mean a trade-off in performance or aesthetics. The other mix that we did launch, so part of the EcoPact range, was EcoPact Zero, which is our carbon neutral concrete. Basically, those two mixes are identical in a mixed design perspective. Wholesome have climate active certification. So what we do is we really drive sustainability by reducing embodied carbon as much as we can, and then we offset the remaining embodied carbon. Is it going to be the way of the future? Offsetting? Definitely not, but it's a step in the right direction, and we just got to keep putting one step in front of the other. I think some of the key myths when it comes to concrete anyway, and we have been faced so many times and having conversations with concreters on site that say, I used green concrete 10 years ago and I was here till midnight trying to finish it. Innovation and technology in the concrete game has come so far in the last 10 years. It's quite incredible. All these points here, Wholesome's EcoPact doesn't deliver longer curing time. We can do PT floors reaching 22 MPa in 3 days. Pumpability to towers, self-compacting concrete, low carbon self-compacting concrete. EcoPact ticks every single one of these boxes, and there are those solutions out there, but it's all about the education process. And we all should be taking a stand on that. We should all be talking to suppliers, having those early conversations, talking to the actual contractor on site, placing it so that they're aware of it. Last year, we did a bit of a roadshow with Surfers for Climate, and what Surfers for Climate do is they basically pull together tradies who go surfing, spend the day surfing, and we did an actual roadshow with them talking to the sustainable concrete solutions that are out there now. And it's quite amazing, talking to the concreters as well as the specifiers. Everyone has a different opinion. I guess when you talk about all those different performance characteristics, this project's a key one that I like to talk about is the raft slab, for example, 700 cubic meter raft slab. I got a phone call the day before from the director saying, Dylan, my concreter is very nervous about tomorrow's pour. He's thinking he's going to be here till midnight. We had technical representation on site, operational representation on site. The concreter was off that slab in the same amount of time as conventional concrete. And then we go on to, the structural side of things. the vertical columns, there's 40, 50, 65 and 80 MPa concrete in this project, all no problem achieving 30%, minimum 30% reduction and not affecting the timeline. Same with the PT slabs, 22 MPa at 3 days. So there are solutions out there now, but it's and you'll hear it time and time again from all of us. Early engagement and early collaboration is definitely the key to understanding what is available, how it can work, and then also doing trials, doing tests, so that we as a supplier can show your contractors or the concreters on site that it's okay. You can use low carbon concrete. You're not going to be there till midnight. It can be placed, pumped and finished like conventional concrete. I guess, it's all well and good to say low carbon concrete or this 25 MPa concrete is reduced to 150 kilos of CO2 emissions per metre, but what does it actually equate to? Simply put, just one typical residential slab supplied low carbon concrete achieving up to a 60% reduction equates to 8 cars off the road. But we're also having those conversations with those volume builders who do 2,000 houses a year. Can you imagine the difference they would make by converting over to low carbon concrete and the impact that could have on our environment? And that's been one of the challenges. And, the whole industry has gone through so many price uplifts and shortages on materials. 2 years ago when we launched, that was a very difficult conversation with developers. Now, developers and builders are starting to understand where we need to go. We've got to get to net zero ultimately by 2050. We need to start acting now. The conversations now are a lot easier to have because there is an interest and people are starting to understand more and more that materials actually, low carbon materials can make a huge difference. Some of the roadblocks obviously being price, and I saw that earlier on. I mean, you can get a low carbon concrete for $5 on top of conventional concrete. It's out there now. You can use it and start factoring it in, but those conversations have to be had during the design phase. How to specify? I guess that's the key words is, ask for low carbon concrete. Make sure that it's verified by a product specific EPD. EPDs it needs to be verified that the product achieves a certain reduction, and it should have climate active certification if you're going to go for carbon neutral concrete. That's probably the key message there. And we're seeing so many projects at the moment. So I monitor projects nationally that actually call for either low carbon concrete, sustainable concrete, EPDs, climate active certification, all those words. And the amount of projects from a national perspective over the last 3 months has multiplied. We're seeing probably 15 to 20 projects per week come through, like I said, nationally, that are calling for some sort of sustainability criteria, which is amazing and it's heading in the right direction, but we need to scale up and we need to keep moving. These are just some of the specifications, and I'm just putting this up as examples to show you, so you can understand what's out there and what are getting written into tender documents, and it's quite amazing. Obviously, we love seeing wholesome and eco-pact in the specs, but ultimately, you've got words there, carbon neutral concrete, verified by an EPD, environmental product declaration, or low carbon concrete, verified by an environmental product declaration. That's amazing. This is where we need to be. And that's it from me, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Dylan. That was terrific. Hearing the potential savings and the fact that you've got placing it, pumping it, and finishing it like conventional concrete, very, very encouraging. Look forward to unpacking a bit of that, drawing out some more in the panel discussion. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Hudson.
All right, Gary Hume, can I hand over to you, sir?
Thank you, Hudson. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gary Hume. I'm the Building Development Manager at HiMix Australia. We're just sharing the screen now. HiMix have been a major supplier of ready-mix concrete since 1957. Can everybody see that okay? Just checking. Hello?
Not yet. Can't see it yet, Gary.
Can't see it. 1 second.
All right. We're away. Yep.
Are we good?
All yours. All
Yeah,
yours.
apologies for that.
Nice and clearly. All good. No trouble at all. Off you go.
Good on you. As I mentioned, Hymix have been a major supplier of ready-mix concrete since 1957. The myth we will be busting today: you can't achieve early age strength with low carbon concrete. Why is this a widely held myth? Simple. To reduce carbon, you have to remove cement, one of the largest contributors to carbon in the industry. But surely that means there'll be a reduction in early age strength and an increase in shrinkage properties. Or does it? For the purpose of this presentation, we used a case study with Western Precast, a valued customer. We selected this application over post-tension or jump form because precast is particularly sensitive to cement fluctuations. This project is the Sydney Metro Southwestern line, which extends for some 30 kilometres, and it goes basically from Chatswood to Bankstown. The objectives of the customer's request was a 50 MPa concrete with a minimum reduction of CO2 by 30% and a minimum lifting strength of 15 MPa at 18 hours, 3 green star points and colour consistency. You can't achieve early age strength with low carbon concrete. Introducing High Sustain. This is our high performance, low carbon concrete. Research and development began in 2019 by our technical team, and a few hundred laboratory trials and many field trials later, going live some 12 months ago, brings us to this presentation. Low carbon concrete, up to 50% CO2 reduction compared to standard concrete. The early age strength is the equivalent of existing GP mixes. And the shrinkage properties are as low as 250 to 450 microstrains. Working with Western Precast. What did we do? Firstly, we introduced Western Precast to the concept that this new technology would in fact meet, even exceed what was being asked of them. Working closely together, carrying out plant trials, we were able to prove how High Sustain worked and what could be achieved. We needed to get the mix approved by both the main contractor and the engineers. Key challenges. As High Sustain is a new technology, working with Western Precast to help their team understand placement and setting times, which, as it happens, is exactly the same as with standard concrete. When Western Precast were convinced the claims were valid, we had to demonstrate to the engineers, John Holland Group and the Robert Bird Group, that this product, the High Sustain performance, would satisfy their requirements and designs. More cooperation between Hymix and Western Precast brought the trust that 180 slump mix would in fact finish at the same time as the 100 slump mix that they were used to using. What was the result? We had a target of 30% CO2 reduction. That was exceeded by 20% to a 50% reduction. Western Precast achieved the 3 green star requirements. And crucially, we kept the project moving by meeting the production program due to the early age strength results. The panel on the right-hand side lifted in 18 hours at 15 MPa, and the massive 47-ton columns that we produced lifted in 2 days. The requirement was 32 MPa, and we hit 39 MPa. The key learnings from this partnership was communication. between ourselves, the customer, and the industry specialists, reaching the balance between CO2 reduction and performance targets. By working together, we could reach a better outcome than the supplied specification. When we introduce this new technology, we need to work and support our customers' journey. We share the technical information to allow them to become comfortable and confident with the new product. The myth: you can't achieve high early age strength with low carbon concrete. We've busted that myth. You can achieve early age strength with low carbon concrete by using high sustain. Thank you, everybody. My details are on the screen now if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Gary, thank you very much. Terrific to hear. Bit of a theme developing here around collaboration conversations early on. I'll be keen to draw some more of that into the panel discussion. Can I also point you to, there are questions coming directly for you in the Q&A, asking about percentage reduction in high sustain and whether that is involving offsets or not. Maybe you could have a look at that question and pop in an answer. But thank you. Great to have a case study to see where this is tested in the real world. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Thomas Ranger now from Laing O'Rourke. Thomas, can I pass to you, please?
You sure can. Sorry, I was just figuring out to turn my camera on. You think I'd be well practiced enough. I'll also just start sharing my screen. I think this one should work. Hopefully that's popped up. I think so. So I'm just going to start. Yeah, great.
Great.
So my name's Tom. I'm a sort of sustainability advisor out at our on one of the level cost removal projects for the Southeastern Program Alliance. And I guess there's probably a bit of confusion between percent SCM and percent carbon reduction or percent cement reduction, but we use SCM in infrastructure mostly because that's what we would then input into the infrastructure sustainability like calculator as a like base case or like business as usual assumption. So that's why we sort of use that terminology, I guess. So this is a reduced presentation. I've got a full 20 to 30 minute one with, so if you'd like to hear more in the future, you can reach out and I'll give you all of the journey we've been on. But I've sort of reduced this one down to just give a bit of the context and challenge and then the like potential issues and I guess how we then sort of like manage those issues going through, just to keep it short and snappy for you. So this is sort of like a group initiative that we had. So between CEPA, so that's an alliance, but I work for Laing O'Rourke, including like Jacobs, LXRP and MTM. We have Vinci Partners who provided us some sort of durability advice, and then Keller is our buying contractor, and you're getting a double whammy from Wholesome today. So if we're lucky. So for us as a project, our challenge was that the majority of our carbon emissions comes from concrete, and for our upcoming projects, about 50% of all the like concrete is piling. And I'm pretty sure we've covered some of the like the myths or sorry, the drawbacks that it can take longer to cure and that sort of stuff. So we sort of like looked at that an opportunity and thought, what did we achieve previously, which was 36% OSM and then a reduction from baseline. So and then also like what was achieved previously, and that was a 65% like mix on Melbourne Metro, which was a slag only mix, but then that sort of registration had lapsed. So like I mentioned, the reason the benefits, we sort of like listed 3 different scenarios we've got up in the right there corner there. So you've got what the business as usual assumption is for LXRP, so that's current like 15% SCM, what we'd previously achieved, and then now sort of like a low carbon like mix. So it's about half from the like business as usual assumptions, and then sort of like almost half again of what we'd like previously been able to achieve. And then there's some sort of like additional benefits that come through increasing the content of like SEM. That's fully detailed from like Vinci Partners in our like tender advice notice for one of our projects. And we're happy to discuss with them and share some sort of like knowledge. But yeah, there's sort of some also durability increases, and that's sort of like, I guess, also more important for our projects, considering we have a 100-year design life. So the first myth or like issue we sort of wanted to talk to was previously, like I mentioned, we achieved a 36% SEM mix, and that was just mainly due to, I guess, the misconception from us that we couldn't use anything higher than 40%, because that was sort of like what was in the Department of Transport standards. So we sort of like did some liaison and like worked with them and also with MTM to determine what was accepted. And once they sort of said, yes, we can accept them, we organised with Keller and Holson to sort of get this like pilotings approved. So it's already been approved. So if you'd like to use one in Victoria, all you've really got to do is order it, or if there's other suppliers and that sort of stuff, they can go through the approval process and should be, I guess, if it meets all the other testing requirements, they should be fine. DOT sort of just gave us the provisions that we needed to allow for like all of the strengths and the development and all that sort of stuff. And then the second issue that we had was surrounding like supply and where it was going to come from. So out in the east, we typically had, I guess, some challenges previously, and that some of the plants only had fly ash available, so we needed to work with our suppliers to sort of get them up. So we did a bit of an engagement with sort of everybody and said, what can you supply to us from what plants? And I guess, can they do the 24-hour works? Can they like, yeah, do they have recycled water, all that sort of stuff? So I think we started early, and this process we sort of started with them was about like 18 months ago or 12 months. So it's a bit of a design. So we sort of just want to start with like start early to solve one of the issues. But hopefully if you sort of like start early and set forward estimates and like have honest discussions with them, you should be able to like manage those risks. And I will get to a lessons learned hopefully in one of the like next slides. So one of the things as well is we understood that it was probably going to cost more. So we did a bit of like market sort of sounding. It's around like 7.5 or like $15 a cubic meter more expensive. And so what we do, just budgeted for it. That became one of our like sort of winning themes for the project. And an infrastructure project that sort of comes in the scale of like 500 million. I mean, we can see how you get to the end of a project, they're looking to reduce budgets, and that sort of comes out of it. But like this was sort of a commitment that we made, and just allowed additional like costs for it. So not to say that it's like, don't want to lie to you, but yeah, it's sort of something we identified and sort of like budgeted for and allowed for. The second one is sort of like when we could then pile adjacent to them. So being 70% SCM, there's only 30% cement then, we sort of achieved the 15 MPa we need within like 2 or 3 days, which means we need to like sequence our piles. So we might create longer piling pads. We might drill one, have to pour it, skip one or even skip two. I was having a conversation with the engineers the other day, and they said might have to skip two and come back. And just what we're forecasting at the moment is being able to use it at 90% of the 90% of the piles at some of our projects, but 100% of the other. And that just depends if we're doing a rail trench solution or a rail over solution. So we've we're working with our engineers as well and trying to still get it used under these sort of like requirements. The next one was sort of like something that was identified early as well. So when I mentioned previously, we developed a like durability like tender advice notice. So we sort of noted that one of the two of the issues could be like excessive bleed, water, and like workability issues. Under that like tender advice notice, we sort of just said that the solutions were like aggregate gradation and chemical additives, but we'd only really know by doing some test piles. So we've done test piles in February, and they sort of like met the workability requirements, and you can see that in the bottom picture below in the sort of J ring, and it was sort of like the perfect balance almost, because it still met the flow requirements but didn't notice any segregation. And the same thing as when we did break back, we sort of really didn't notice any bleed water, but that was sort of just a trial of like 2 piles. We'll still need to do some more, I guess, piles to get a larger data set. So to use an insight, with just be honest, you've got to start and budget a little bit more for it. Or if you've already started your project, just have an honest discussion about this is how much it's going to cost each for our total amount of piling. Is it worth us going down? If we can halve our carbon emissions, I say it's probably definitely worthwhile investigating. And then, yeah, sort of talk about how you're going to sequence them. If it's something like an occupation in the rail sector, there might be just some you can't use it for. You might need some that have really high early strength, and that's probably where you probably couldn't use this mix unless you go with some new innovative additives. And then just, yeah, engage with your supplier and forecast early. And then use a couple of piles as the first test piles, which you probably should do at any site, just to make sure you've got the right methodology and all that sort of stuff. And if you need to over pour them again, that should be okay. Or you could just order the approved mix from Wholesome, or discuss with your supplier about getting a mix approved. So I'll take some questions at the end. This is from a photo from our trial. Like, as you can see, we're all super stoked to have used it. So thanks, everybody. My teammate Claire's not really a fan of the photo, so she probably hate me.
Thomas, that was great. Thank you. And obviously a lot of moving parts in a partnership project like your case study. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Lots of questions are coming into the Q&A and the chat. So definitely stimulating a lot of thoughts. Please have a look at those too, Thomas, and if any apply to you, please answer. And now over to Melissa. Different material this time, Melissa. Talk to us about aluminium. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I will talk about aluminium. Let me just share my screen just a moment. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, maybe pop it into slide mode rather into.
Oh, yes, I tried that.
Yep.
Oh, here we go.
Well done, you're away.
Beautiful. So yes, as mentioned in the introduction, I'm the specification manager for Capral, and I'm thrilled to be part of this fantastic event. So glad to hear so many attendees today. For those of you that don't know, Capral is Australia's largest manufacturer and distributor of aluminium profiles, and last year announced its commitment to achieving net zero by 2050. Today's presentation will give you a quick introduction into the next important step Capral have taken on their sustainability journey relating to the procurement and supply of lower carbon aluminium. So these are very quick presentations, so I don't have much time. I'm going to jump straight into it. And I'd like to start by playing a video outlining some key facts about aluminium production, sustainability, and an overview of the low-cal offering. Okay, so I hope everyone found that informative and that the video didn't lag too much. So of course, we're all here today because we are aware of embodied carbon in materials, and aluminium is one of the most carbon intensive materials used by the construction and manufacturing sectors. To recap where the carbon emissions come from in the aluminium production process, bauxite mining, alumina refining and transport of raw materials to the smelter represents approximately 2.6 kilograms of embodied carbon per kilogram of aluminium. We have calculated the carbon emissions of our aluminium extrusion process to be approximately 0.47 kilos of embodied carbon per kilogram of aluminium extruded. But the main contribution to the carbon emissions of aluminium comes from the electrolysis process used in the smelting process. Around 60% of the sector's greenhouse gas emissions are from the production of electricity consumed during smelting. So you can see that there in the middle bar. So it's estimated that the current global average carbon emission for primary aluminium is 16.8 kilograms per 16.8 kilograms of CO2 emissions per kilogram of aluminium. And within Australia, the 4 aluminium smelters consume approximately 10% of the national energy grid. The good news is that we have a lower carbon solution ready to supply now. Using alternative technologies, aluminium can be produced with a significantly lower carbon footprint. In fact, aluminium with a CO2 emission of 4 kilograms per kilogram of aluminium is available and recognised as some of the lowest carbon aluminium on the market. Enter LocAl, Capral's newly released lower carbon aluminium offer for Australian manufacturers. It's locally extruded by Capral with aluminium sourced from ASI certified smelters. We are the first extruder in Australia to promote this and have made it available to the various markets we service that use aluminium extrusions. When you choose LocAl, you are making a cleaner, greener choice for your project, at least halving the embodied carbon of the aluminium. Primary billet certified CO2 emission content at or below 8 kilograms for green, LocAl green, and only 4 kilograms for the LocAl super green. Now, how do we know where the aluminium comes from, and how can you be sure that our claims can be verified? To provide transparency to our customers around how we supply LocAl and to give a benchmark for constantly improving our sustainability practices, Capral has become a member of ASI. ASI is the Aluminium Stewardship Initiative, a global non-profit organisation that brings together producers, users and stakeholders in the aluminium value chain. ASI has developed an independent third-party certification program to ensure its sustainability and human rights principles are increasingly embedded in aluminium production, use and recycling. ASI's performance standard and chain of custody standard are designed to link responsible production with responsible sourcing and thus support increased emphasis on sustainability in procurement practices. As members of ASI, Capral is required to undergo regular audits and a certification process, which provides our customers assurance that we are providing LocAl and that our supply methods and certification process is transparent and relied upon. Capral were assessed for ASI certification to performance and chain of custody standards version 3 in March. The smelters that we source billets from are also ASI certified. Chain of custody allows for tracking at each stage of the aluminium process. Capral has implemented a material accounting system to track ASI chain of custody material within the company. This ensures the responsible sourcing and adherence to environmental, social, and governance practices. Now, price. This has been popular. How much will lower carbon aluminium cost? So in 2023, we will procure around 21% of our billet as LocAl. That is 15 tonne of low carbon aluminium. So we have EPDs currently available ex-smelter for low-cal green and super green, and Capral will have their own EPDs for release to market at the end of the third quarter of this year. Now, there is a small price premium that will be charged for the supply of these two products. But the good news is that Capral have chosen to absorb the extra cost and not pass it on to any of our proprietary window and door systems. So I'll repeat that. Lower carbon aluminium can be specified now through Capral for no additional cost for our locally extruded systems. So other sections like security, geometrics, industrial angles and the like can be ordered in low-cal green or super green and will attract the premium. Low-cal super green orders will also attract the premium. Ultimately, we don't want costs to be a deterrent or a barrier to our customers using low-cal while the industry moves towards decarbonisation. And I would argue that the more we specify lower embodied carbon products, the swifter the industry will move to overcome energy challenges because strong consumer demand can't be ignored. So thank you so much, and I look forward to answering any questions later in the session.
Thanks, Melissa. That was terrific. Very, very interested to hear about the local products not attracting the premium. There's a myth busted right there. That's great.
Thank you.
Exciting. Look forward to hearing your comments in the panel discussion. And I'd ask you, like all the other speakers, keep an eye on the questions because we've got such an engaged audience. They will be asking them. All right, Matt DeMarco, mate, I can't see you if only you were wearing something bright.
Oh, way too bright.
All right, over to you. Thank you, Matt.
Awesome. So good afternoon, beautiful people. My name is Matt DeMarco, and I am the co-founder and creator of Opportunity at Inti Asia Pacific. Today, we'll be talking about deviating from specifications. And I'm going to be taking my consultant hat off and putting my contractor hat on and speaking from a contractor's perspective. We haven't got much time. We're at 8 minutes apparently. So let's get stuck into it. All right, so today's agenda. We're going to be going through the types of specifications out there, the top barriers to deviating from specifications, the deviation, or more formally known, the concession process, what that looks like. We'll go through some examples and my recommendations at the end. Okay, types of specs. We have descriptive specs, and these describe the requirements for materials, craftsmanship, and installation that must be followed. We have prescriptive specifications, and these prescribe the particular material and method that you need to achieve results. We have reference specs, and these reference certain documents, just like Australian standards. And of course, the one we always aim for, performance-based specs. And these specify the design outcome and the criteria by which the outcome will be evaluated upon. So all these types of specs, they offer differing levels of flexibility in terms of the types of materials that you can use on site on a construction project, in your design and in your build. Key question, can we deviate from specifications? Yes, we bloody can, and we have in the past, and we will in the future. But there are a few challenges to this, and we'll go through some of those barriers. So in my experience, these are my top barriers from deviating from specifications. The type of spec. As we went through previously, the type of spec is important because that dictates what you can and can't do. We try and aim for a performance-based spec, but it's not always the case. So that's a key barrier. Time. Time is key, time is money, and program is one of the most important things a project director wants to stick to. Because if you go over program, you blow out costs. So you don't want to be holding things up. So missed opportunities. You want to get this done early. There is a window of opportunity to get this successfully over the line. And that's at the planning phase, tender phase, or at very early design. You can do this at the construction phase, but you've got to realize, or we've got to consider all the other barriers along with this, and you've got to make sure it's a quick deviation. Otherwise, you'll hold up program. People can be amazing, but people can also be a pain in the ass, let's face it. People ourselves, they are a barrier, and I'll speak about this at the end. And you don't know what you don't know. Certain agencies, they voice their concession process. Some don't. Some are formal, some are not so formal. So it's kind of hard to work out if there is a formal concession process on your project or with your client. Okay, so how can we deviate from specs? We'll go through some examples, but firstly, I just want to show you what Transport for New South Wales have. So in front of you here is Transport's concession process, and that looks scary, but it's there for a reason. It's there to assess the risk and also manage risk. I love that process. It's once you go through it, all you have to do is follow that process flow and address the boxes. Other agencies do have a concession process, but it's not as formal as this one. And they are, you could say, a lot more flexible than the Transport concession process. But I assure you, Transport are working on this and to make it as efficient as possible to, get past that barrier of that time. Okay, some live examples we've done in the past. Asphalt. So the specific specification here was R116 on a TFNSW project, particularly looking at the product called Tonoplast. We wanted to lay Tonoplast or put Tonoplast into our asphalt mix and lay that on some access roads on a project called the New Intercity Fleet Maintenance Facility on the beautiful Central Coast. Where else would you rather be? How do we do that? We'll go through that next. It was a gate process. This was considered a minor change, and it only took 3 months to get over the line. So how did we do it? What was our game plan? First of all, we identified and informed our stakeholders and key decision makers. We then asked the golden question: what do you need to sign this off? We wrote that down, everyone committed to that, and we gained a tentative green light to proceed. We confirmed our concession process with our client, and I suggest you do the same to make sure everyone is on the same page of the steps to come. We confirmed cost, very important, going to make sure it's within budget or allowance of budget. We confirmed warranty with the manufacturer to make sure no one's coming after you if things do go wrong. There's a low risk of things going wrong in the future. Liability, most projects come with a 2-year maintenance period. So you want to agree with the client of those liability terms. We then developed a business case. In this case, we obtained an approval to use from the asset owner because Transport were not the asset owner. And generally, whatever the asset owner wants, they get. And we also obtained examples of past projects laying this product to give Transport the confidence and lower the risk profile for them to sign this off. And once that was in place, we went through the concession process. And then there you go, it was approved. And we laid a beautiful stretch of road along the New Intercity Fleet Maintenance Facility. Example number 2, you may have heard about this, you may have not, a TFNSW project again. It was concerning the R53 specification, a non-structural concrete specification, and it was all about geopolymer. And it was on the WestConnex Roselle interchange, and also following a Sydney road project, which is probably the worst kept secret out there. It took a lot of persistence. And once again, we had to lower the risk profile and convince many, many stakeholders, and took 1 year and 2 months to get approval to use. So how did we do this one? Similar process. We identified and informed all our stakeholders and key decision makers. Because this was a high risk application in their eyes, we had to consult many, many people. Once again, we asked the golden question: what do you need to sign this off? And gained a tentative green light to proceed. We applied for some funding and did some R&D, because this is not a new product. There is some research out there, but we wanted to create no IP. We wanted to hand over all IP to our client to inform a specification change, because this is not just about geopolymer. This is about all low carbon concrete. We wanted to get all of Borrell's products, all of Holcim's products, High Mix, Adbri, whatever they have. If you've got a low carbon mix, we wanted to get those into specs. And so we thought we'd go the nth degree and trial a geopolymer and get approval for that to allow for those mixes to be used in the future. Once again, we confirmed the concession process. And then we went on the sell, developed a business case, and this took a very long time. And a reason why it took 1 year and 2 months was selling it to the project, the manufacturer, and the client. Everyone had their concerns, and we had to bust some myths. Liability, we made sure that the client took liability for this. As the project and the contractor, we didn't want to take this on in the future. So we came to agreement with TFNSW that they took on this liability in the long run. We developed a project-specific spec to use geopolymer, and we used that to benchmark our performance upon. Our R&D, it's still going. It's a 3-year program. We poured our first geopolymer mix in the first year, and we compared our results against that project-specific spec to make sure it performed the way it was supposed to. And then once that was all good and given the green light, we proceeded formally with the concession process. And boom, boom, shake the room. We got it approved and we started pouring. So that was fantastic. Okay, so my recommendations, what have I learned? Know your contractual concession process. Once again, you don't know what you don't know. There are different processes out there. They are more flexible than others. They're more formal or informal than others. So please know that, because you have to communicate that to your project and also the other stakeholders you are dealing with. Agencies need to raise awareness of their concession process. Relating to my first point, I think it's really important that delivery agencies make an effort to show people, if you do have a better way of doing things, here's the process to go through to get that approved. Leadership is paramount. If you do not have the backing of your senior leadership team, good luck to you. It is really important that our project directors, senior leaders, whoever they may be, back you all the way and along on the journey. It makes life a lot easier. Start early. Like I said, time is money. Program. You do not want to delay program. And depending on the type of deviation you want to pursue, they take longer. Or they take a short amount of time or a long amount of time, depending on the risk that deviation may pose to your design and build. Know your spec. You'd be surprised that most specs are more performance-based than you think. And people have this perception that, oh no, B80, you can't do anything. R53, I can only do so much in terms of concrete. But if you actually read that specification and you consulted with subject matter experts, you'd be surprised of how much you can actually do without deviating, that is. This might split the room. So do you even need to deviate? If you want to introduce an alternate product, is it worth it? Why not build clever? Look at the design. That's where the big savings are. Can you eliminate certain things? Stop over-engineering. Half the thickness of that slab. There are some big savings there if you concentrate on the design. And a confused mind will always say no. And we found this particularly in our geopolymer journey. We had a lot of decision makers, or this is not just geopolymer, this is in general, that don't know the manufacturing process and they don't know how the material is supposed to perform. This is not just on the client side, this is also on the contractor side. This is sustainability professionals. They want to do things, but they don't understand what the material is supposed to do. And that whole line of people, from on the ground to senior leadership to that client side, it's imperative that people know their product that you're making a decision upon. Because if they don't know it, they're just going to say no because they don't understand. So I hope I've challenged your thinking today, because if you've got a better way of doing things, voice it, because this is one tool in our toolkit that will propel ourselves into a sustainable future for you and your family. Thank you.
Matt, thank you. Your enthusiasm is palpable. Love it. And having practical case studies like that is always the way to get the message across. I love what you're saying about leadership. I think the L in MECLA is for leadership. So that resonates strongly with us, and really keen to hear your thoughts in the conversation to come. And I'm going to pop, I actually live just up the road. I'm joining you from just up the road from the Rosehill interchange. And I'm going to go and get my boots, well, hopefully not stuck in the setting geopolymer, but I'm going to go and have a look at it. So great stuff. Good to know that's just down the end of my street. That brings us to the end of the set pieces. I'd like to ask now each of our speakers to pop their cameras on. And Nicole Sullivan, if you can join us now too. Because everyone else has had a chance to speak, I think every single speaker referenced EPDs. So that's no doubt prompting thoughts from you, Nicole. Can I ask you, how do you see, we know EPDs are a terrific practice, but they can be expensive. It's time consuming to get one, and there aren't as many out there as we would like. What does the future look like for EPDs?
Yeah, really good question. For those who don't know, EPDs are environmental product declarations, and they're the international standards compliant method of publishing your life cycle assessment results, including particularly embodied carbon data in the context of this discussion. EPDs are becoming more and more prolific, and in our work with Neighbours last year, Neighbours has prioritised EPDs as the #1 source of data that they want to see industry providing to support embodied carbon measurement for buildings under their new rating tool that they plan to release next year. So more and more EPDs are coming out, and we have, it feels like the circle is widening in terms of the number of companies that are now approaching us wanting to talk about EPDs, understand what it takes. But Hudson, you're right. It can be very expensive to do EPDs, and it's actually becoming even more expensive just with some changes in rules and rigor. And so what does that mean? Well, it means we have to get smarter. We just heard Matt talking about building clever. We have to measure clever as well, can I say? Part of that is, so there's a thing called an industry average EPD or an industry sector EPD, where companies band together to contribute to an EPD. That is one way. It's not as highly valued data as a product specific one though. And you know, we heard about product specific or project specific even EPDs from concrete manufacturers earlier. What we can do is have companies, let's say they're part of the same association, they have very similar production methodologies. We can actually help companies to work together to streamline and assist each other to all do this together through associations. And that's really the next level for us. And we're starting to work with associations on that basis, right. Because ultimately we have to find a way to make this accessible and cheaper, not just for the small and medium enterprises, but also for startups.
Terrific. Quick follow-on question from the chat. Mel Rowan's asking, what are the average costs of EPDs?
Oh, that's definitely how long is a piece of string. The cheapest EPDs are probably sitting around the 30 grand or so these days. Yep. If you have really, really complex production chains with many, many different types of products, the highest number I have heard for an incredibly complex manufacturing system producing many products, many EPDs, is around 300 grand. So it can get really big and expensive if you are a massive manufacturer with really diverse products. But because companies are investing in transparency, we also need to support them in doing that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. And thanks for the question on that point. Now, I'd like to ask Melissa a question. The fellows talking about concrete are always addressing, is there a difference in performance? Is it as strong? Does it, rest as well, and so on? Does it set as well? Are there different performance? And this is, I suppose, for the lay people that may be in the call, are there different performances for the aluminium products that you have that have lower carbon accredited to them?
Yeah, thanks, Hudson. That is a really good question. And the answer is no, there is absolutely no difference whatsoever in the final product. The difference, or the way that the embodied carbon is lowered in lower carbon aluminium, is the way that it's is basically what energy has been used in the smeltering process.
Okay. All right. You've answered two questions there. Thank you. Bonus. Gary, can I ask you a question? You mentioned needing to talk to people early on, as did Dylan. Both of you, what do those conversations look like? Is it, who are you talking to? How do you start the conversation? By the way, we've got this product, or hey, have you guys looked at the end embodied carbon for your whole project? How do you start that conversation? Gary, you first, and then I'd love to hear from Dylan as well.
Yeah, primarily, Hudson, the conversation starts from day one when they ask the question, can you supply a carbon reduced mix?
Right.
Every application at this stage is virtually a new application for the high sustain product. Yes, the conversation starts with, how does it react? How is it different to pump? How is it different to place? How is it different to finish?
Yeah.
The beauty of high sustain is there is no difference in any of those applications.
Right.
It pumps up to now. We pumped it to 87 levels, so we know it pumps well.
Yep.
It finishes in the same time as the concrete they were used to using 2-3 years ago. And the finish and the results, the test results, are exactly the same. With the enabled carbon in the project, we, depending on the size of the customer, because we've touched on cost, if you take a tier 1 builder as an example, we don't see a generic EPD has particularly any value to us in that situation. We would rather give them a monthly report on the mixes they've used that month, and to ensure that we're keeping to the targets. And then at the end of the project, when we've got the final figures, when we've got all the information we need, then we produce the EPD specific. And of course, then it leads into offsetting and whatever. So,
Dylan, how do you go about that conversation? Is it similar or different experiences?
Oh, look, I think it's similar, but for us, or from my perspective, it's more about that engagement with the architect, the engineer, the designer, the sustainability consultant, pulling together that, the key stakeholders, and having a very upfront conversation, honest conversation about what's the project's targets, what do they want to achieve, and those sorts of conversations I had. Like I said, I've done 150 presentations last year. Someone will reach out to me off the back of that, and we'll start talking about a project. From there, it's also about us dragging, and I shouldn't say dragging, but it's about us having the right stakeholders from Wholesome's perspective in the room. So having our technical manager present, myself, our sustainability manager, and we all sit there in the room and we work through the project bit by bit, tackle the engineering, tackle the sustainability, and then we keep going all the way through. From that point, then it's once the project goes out to tender, it doesn't just stop there. You've got to then have the conversation, the exact same conversation, and educate the contractors who are tendering on the project. Talk them through EcoPact, talk them through EcoPact Zero, make sure they understand it. If the successful contractor might have never placed EcoPact or EcoPact Zero. So from there, then it's suggesting a trial. Let's do a trial on one of your current projects. So you've got an opportunity to actually trial it before this major project coming up. And it's working with all key stakeholders right the way through and having those conversations. You can't just stop with the design team and then walk away and let it all go.
Thanks, Dylan. Interesting. This really sounds like, you know, it's a fantastic application of change management. I know, Matt, you're passionate about this. And I think you just like the word deviation. I've got a theory there, but the concession process and that process map that you showed us from Transport for New South Wales, they've set out right up front, if you want something different, this is how to go about it. But it does sound like change management. What would you build on what the other two gentlemen have just said?
Right, in terms of how you would tackle this from a contractor perspective or on site.
Yeah, so we've heard the early conversations, but I've heard in separate MECLA conversations that once it gets on site, you know, the blokes in gumboots and high vis are like, what's this? So
and it's taken them along the journey. So we've poured many types of different concrete mixes that probably almost 90% of them, the concrete we're not happy with. We had one crew about to walk off the job. We had one crew just throw the trowel, and then we've got one of the supervisors or someone to come in and goes, you know what, I'll show you how to do it. Or some of the concrete, someone from Wholesome or High Mix, one of their people goes, if you're not going to do it, I'll do it. I'll show you how to do it, showing them up. It's kind of playing on that ego a little bit. But yeah, you're right. It's having that support from Gary and Dylan on the project makes a massive difference. It makes the process go a lot smoother and a lot faster. It's key that they're involved. And I think, Gary, you mentioned you were involved on site as well in your presentation.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And that's what we love. It helps us immensely.
So practical demonstration, not just use the theory. This is how it works.
Yeah. If you want to learn from someone who gives the best practical demonstration, everyone knows Tony Collister. If you don't know him, where have you been? The guy with the mullet. He got on site and he showed everyone how to do it, not only at one project, but he traveled with us. And look at that product now. It's almost everywhere.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. Thomas, can I turn to you? One of the questions in the Q&A is asking about piling durability and wondering if there's effort been made to do an analysis in situ tests for concrete encapsulating the steel.
Yeah, I was hoping to clarify that with Jason a little bit. I think there's two parts of that. At the test piles themselves are at the Union Monalba Road project, which is sort of a rail trench. So they were excavated down 2 meters, but then covered subsequently with shotcrete, I believe. So they were available for inspection for a little bit and then covered up. But at the moment, we're sort of still relying on carbonation modeling. So I guess we've got to do 2 forms of carbonation modeling for that concrete, which is, just mostly, I guess, with our ground conditions. And luckily where we are at it, like Lilydale, we're sort of like in the freshwater sort of zone, so low saline conditions. But then, we're sort of governed by, I guess, 75 mils of cover. So that's the sort of the conditions. And I think it's similar to a question that Marie might have had. So it's the hot topic about durability for everybody involved.
Thanks, Thomas. So a question I'd like to ask each of you, and starting with Melissa from the aluminium perspective, and that is the availability of a product from a geographical point of view. I'm joining you from big metropolitan Sydney, and I know, Melbourne has industrial supply as well. But what if I'm the other side of the sandstone curtain? I'm past the Great Dividing Range. Can I get your product? Melissa, starting with you, and then I'll name names and ask.
Okay, yes, you sure can. Capral has a national footprint for distribution centres. So, wherever you are in Australia, you can access low-cal aluminium.
Okay, that's great. Dylan, Wholesome, can I, if I'm in Broken Hill or if I'm in Cowra, can I get your product? Or what if I'm in somewhere in Western Australia or Northern South Australia?
Yeah, definitely, Hudson. So we've got a national footprint there. We've got roughly 190 concrete plants across the country. What I'll do is I'll share a link to plant locations with the group. Basically, all you need to do is type in the address of the project and it'll zoom into our closest concrete plants.
That's terrific. So, and I'm not asking a Dorothy Dix here. The prompt to get me to ask this one, there's several people in the chat asking this, and one of the stakeholder groups, MECLA, works with our local government. We're talking to councils around the country, and they're saying, well, look, it's all very well for you lot in Sydney, but I'm in Cairns. What about me? You know, so.
No, it's a great question, and I think it needs to be asked because, you know, for example, travelling up to Cairns and presenting up in Cairns to Cairns Regional Council, that's where we need to be as well as the metro areas. It's not just focusing on metro. We need to look at regional areas as well. Indeed. Gary, what's your experience with that? Can you get it anywhere?
Yes, well, just to explain, it's a bit of a convoluted one. Hymix are part of the Hanson Construction Materials Group in Australia, which is part of the global Heidelberg Group. So the answer to the question is yes, it's available certainly in all the states, but there are some areas where we have to modify the plant slightly to carry slag. Other than that, Hanson market this product as under the brand of Ecotera. It's exactly the same technology as High Sustain. So that we are very active in the eastern region, New South Wales, Queensland, but Hanson, of course, are a national company.
All right, thanks, Gary. Matt, what's your experience as, you know, someone wearing high vis? If you want to do these projects in different places, can you?
Yes, you can. And Gary and Dylan, you said, yeah, you can get our product anywhere, but our experience, depending on where you are, that could come at a big premium or not. So location, there's a cost to that, depending on where you are, accessibility. So you've got to be aware of that.
Okay, so partly myth busting, but partly a barrier identified. All right. And Thomas, you're from Laing O'Rourke, all around the country. What's your experience of accessing this in different places?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we were limited to one of the plants I guess we were looking at previously, which only had a slag silo, but I guess Dylan, Tim and Wholesome for that one were very good, and we identified that I guess months or in advance, and they've upgraded that plant to be able to supply a triple blend. So I think that probably factors in a little bit to the additional like $15 a cubic meter, all that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, some places will need to do plant upgrades and all that sort of stuff to be able to do it. So yeah, I think just starting early and factoring it in. But yeah, very understandable. I mean, it definitely gave us better outcomes as well, being able to understand we needed to upgrade that plant.
Yeah. Okay.
I think at Hudson, it all comes down to those early conversations.
Yeah.
Asking that question up early, up front. And Matt, you're right. There's some locations that we don't have a footprint, or the concrete plant might be 50 k's away from site, but having those conversations early, you can understand the logistics.
I was in a meeting with a couple of government departments yesterday, and it was really interesting that a figure of an average cement replacement rate of 25% in Australia was quoted. I don't know the source of the data, but that's the number that was quoted in the meeting, which I found quite fascinating. Number one, Australia is quite a big hitter globally in what we're achieving. But number two, if you think that doing 25 or 30% makes you special, it's not. You're average, so pick up your game.
All right. Challenging for further myth busting. That's terrific. Thanks, Nicole. Look, there's still some questions coming in on the Q&A, so I'll go through a couple of them. Question from George: what has enabled your organisation to make such significant step changes, considering the really short term? Is there opportunity on customer purchasing changes? Is the government influence important? Is it both? And how might this continued momentum continue? And by the way, great work. So what obviously Wholesome and Hymix have the product and want to sell it. but you've mentioned, Matt, to Transport for New South Wales, and they're, we know they're one of the leaders, but is it customer saying I can do this? Is it designer, engineer at Lang O'Rourke, your team saying, hey, we've got this opportunity? Who's causing this? Where's the demand coming from?
Yeah, Hudson, at at least the Southeast Program Alliance in Victoria, that's a sort of program of works which has allowed us to sort of set targets and build and all that sort of stuff and think project to project. So we trialed it at our Union One Albert project, but we're going to use it on the more extensively, I guess, on our other ones. So we've been lucky in that respect. But then I guess we're sort of sharing it more broadly with, I guess, Lang O'Rourke and also the industry. I mean, LXRP is great as well, having 5 alliances of sharing with each of the different, alliance partners for those. So we've sort of done some presentations with the joint coordination committees and that sort of stuff. So, and I guess this as well helps with it, just like knowledge sharing and that sort of stuff. But we've been lucky in that alliance sort of system. So government's setting those processes up and even having rewards for emissions reductions and innovations as well. So I guess we get rewarded for those sort of things. There's some big drivers.
That makes sense. Melissa, what prompts your customers to ask for low-cal?
Oh, well, I mean, this is a conversation that we've been having with architects and, building designers and other industry professionals for many, 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 many years. I would argue that, I guess, the changes that we've made haven't really been in the short term. They've been a long-term plan. We actually procure aluminium 3 years in advance. And, the momentum has been building with our customers, demanding lower embodied carbon. And, that comes with education. The more they understand about what they're specifying, the more they understand about what, greenhouse gases are doing to our climate. And, the more education is out there, then the more companies are going to respond. And I really think that any companies that aren't responding at this point in time are probably going to be left behind.
I hope you're right. That's great. Hey, Matt, a question for you that's come from Michael Heathwood. What laboratory testing was conducted on the geopolymer mix as part of the project-specific specification to allow the mix to be used under R53?
I can provide you that, but not online here. If you want to give me a call, I can give you that information. So it's publicly known that UNSW are doing that research. They've got to get a few things across the line before that goes public. They've got ARV doing a third-party verification on that data as well. So got my contact details on that slide. Give me a buzz, and I'll point you in the right direction.
Good on you for putting your name out there, Matt. That's great. Interestingly, David Eckstein, former colleague of mine, g'day David, added in there, the City of Sydney did a trial on geopolymer concrete. It's actually one of the case studies on our MECLA website, one of the resources there, but saying for a heavily trafficked road, it's performing well 4 years on with a reference link. So check that out.
And we use that case study for our business case, getting ours over the line as well. So we work with Foster to get as much information as possible. And it's well aware of that too.
Yeah, fantastic. Seeing organisations put their money where their mouth is and testing these things in the real world, but then sharing the information. I think that sharing is fantastic. Nicole, I'd like to ask you about the question from John Delavia about the GBCA giving more credits for branded third-party EPDs like Global Green Tag when others report the same information. It's quite technical, but in your field.
A really helpful question. So I mentioned before that EPDs are an international standards compliant way of demonstrating LCA results, life cycle assessment results. That international standard is ISO 14025 for the nerds like me. ISO 14025 requires that Type 3 environmental declarations, which is the official term for an EPD, are published through a registered EPD program operator. Registered EPD program operators control how EPDs are published. So Global Green Tag is one of those. EPD Australasia is another. EPD Australasia operates under the banner of the International EPD System. There are others internationally, so things like UL, IBU in Germany, and so forth. There's quite a lot out there. Those EPD programs then have something called general program instructions that very specifically say how an EPD needs to be published. And there are a couple of particular things about that. One is it must be third-party verified by a qualified reviewer. So you get put through the ringer doing an EPD with the study that you do and the results that you publish. And so that's actually the mark of credibility of the data. So my answer to it comes out under a brand for the same information, it's not the same information because it's information you can trust if it's been third-party verified and published in an EPD. And the other particular point of note here is those EPD programs have very specific instructions on what you can do. There are a number of declarations floating around in the market now where claims of low carbon are being made on what we call a mass balance basis. So we'll reduce our total quantity of carbon footprint across our operation, but we'll assign all of that reduction to a specific amount of our product at a lower rate. So instead of having a 10% reduction across all of your production, you can call 10% of your production zero is the inference there. That's a very dangerous claim. You cannot get that material with that particular characteristic. And at the moment, EPD programs are not allowing that kind of claim to be made. So it's really important when you get your data that you understand how it is generated and whether that is actually a real number and a real result, or whether there is a risk of greenwashing by you adopting that claim into your claims for your project.
Okay, I think greenwashing is an increasing area of focus and risk for our industry. I think it's also a risk for the good guys, those that are wanting to do the right thing, have their good work undermined when others wash their way into the green sphere. A question for Dylan. You mentioned residential and the slab of the home. Now, the residential sector is it's essentially cottage industry. What are the barriers specific to the resi world as opposed to, WestConnex and Sydney Metro and, big projects where you've got big engineering companies and so on, like our friends from Lang O'Rourke. But, if it's Bob the builder who does 4 slabs a year, how do you convince him that you're not going to have problems of shrinkage or time or cost?
Great question, Hudson. And look, I think the cost is a massive part of it. Like I said in the presentation, the last 3 to 4 years, builders have had so many price increases, shortages of materials. So that is a significant part of it. But I mean, I mentioned the cost, $400 onto the total concrete supply for a house, a standard residential house, and you've got a low carbon product. So it's not a lot. And it also allows them something to present to their clients. Would you like a sustainable solution in your concrete, or would you just like conventional? So they have that ability to sell that on as well. The typical concreters that do place just your typical residential slabs, that is the hardest discussion to have because they're not interested. They just want to pour the concrete, get off the concrete and go home. So it's a bit of a battle to have those conversations, but once you start talking them through, in some cases, you can actually work it a lot easier. The workability is better, the durability is better, and you give them an opportunity to actually trial the mixes. They kind of understand from a performance perspective that is quite easier because it's not just your typical 80 slump. We can do 100 slump, and we typically like to sell EcoPact at 100 slump and up. So that's one selling point. And then it's also convincing them that they can also on-sell it onto their clients as well and talk to their clients about it.
Okay. You may be aware that we've recently started a working group for the residential building sector. So I'd love to have this collection of speakers come and speak to that working group because we do have Frasers and Mirvac and Stockland, as well as others. And I think those leaders can then, the big players can hopefully bring the Bob the Builders along with them if they can demonstrate that, yeah, it works. All right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. And Gary would be keen to give you the opportunity for that as well, not picking winners. It's the change that we're after. The other bit about the guys pouring the slab not being interested, how do you deal with the builder who takes on liability? 7 years builder's guarantee, facing a lot of other risks at the moment, but always working at in a precarious cottage industry, small margins. How do they manage that? But I've always known that one. I know that's not going to go wrong. And now you want me to change? How do you respond to that?
Look, Holcim have been supplying sustainable concrete for well over 15 years. We've been using triple blend mixers and fly ash and slag in our mixers for well over 15 years. What is new is that previously we couldn't quantify the embodied carbon. We couldn't tell you the reduction. Now we have the EPDs to back it up, and now we can actually start pushing the boundaries. So we know, Bob the Builder might have been using the exact same concrete or a slightly lower carbon concrete, a higher embodied carbon concrete, all his life, has never known it because he's never thought to look at the mix design or asked for the mix design. Having the EPDs and going down that road of having that certification means we can keep pushing the boundaries. And by pushing the boundaries, we're now achieving up to a 70% reduction in embodied carbon in some mixes in some states. And it's all about talking to our customers and saying, hey, would you like to trial this mix? This is what we want to trial. We want to get some mix data on it before we actually go to the public and say, hey, Holcim now have a 70% reduction in embodied carbon. So it's doing those trials and testing first, having those customers, those loyal customers who want to trial it, and then talking to the other builders.
Fantastic. All right, Dylan, thank you. Now I've looked at the time. We've really flown through our 90 minutes. We've got 2 minutes left. So that leaves me with the task of thanking you all. This has been really terrific. I think, like all good conversations, it could continue. It's probably better to leave wanting more than thinking that was boring and too long. But look, thank you all very, very much for sharing your expertise, your case studies, and busting myths. As a group, we've got so much to do, but it's really energizing to hear how much is being done and the runs on the board that you've got and you can talk to. So Dylan, thank you very much for your contribution.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Gary, thank you to you. I think that was terrific, and hearing the industrial sector experience with the case study, that was terrific. Thomas, what you were saying with your 70% SCM, the fact that it was all brought into the conversation early, that's 3 of you in a row saying that. I think there's a key message there for all of us as a takeaway. Melissa, from a Capral low-cal aluminium perspective, the green and super green, I'm very fascinated to hear that there's no premium for the door and window products made from that. Thank you for your time. Matt, enthusiastic as ever. If ever I need to deviate, I'll know who to call. I'd really love to see those 7 steps that you put forward. I think there's I know you've prepared things for MECLA already in our resources, but I'd point people towards those because it's great to look at that and go, okay, what's next? Who do I have to talk to next? So really, thank you for stepping that out with practical examples. That was fantastic.
Having me.
And Nicole, having your expertise on EPDs and the detailed world of the life cycle assessment expert, really appreciate your input. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. The discussion, the video of this will be available on the website and available for registered attendees shortly, once our Secretariat guys have polished it up. I'd really like to thank Monica Richter from WWF for bringing the global perspective of WWF and her personal drive to make MECLA succeed. To Kati Vahayan and Alexi Barnstone, who helped from Climate Kick Australia, They make sure that our secretariat works. They keep us running smoothly and have strategic insights day to day as we progress. So really appreciate their work. Encourage everybody to keep an eye out on our socials, particularly LinkedIn, for MECLA updates and relevant industry happenings. Our next event, very excited to tell you, Wednesday, the 14th of June. That will be a MECLA community event where the co-chairs of each working group will present what they've been doing. There's so much going on inside MECLA. Sometimes it can be hard to know what the other groups are working on. So we'll hear from each working group what they've done, what they've produced, and what they're planning to do in the next year. So that growing body of expertise will be there for us all to share. For now, thank you all very much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Hudson.